many perhaps dreamed of their resurrection under the Christian faith when they died in the 1800s and were buried in Baltimore's churchyards. It's doubtful those souls' dreams of resurrection were of their corpses being hauled out of graves on fishing lines. What else could they have expected? This was Resurrection City after all. But what's a city without its king? Baltimore in the early 1800s was rife with disease. Industrialization led to a population boom that brought typhus, cholera, tuberculosis, dysentery, smallpox, and yellow fever outbreaks. A third of infants died before reaching childhood. What doctors the people had were not well trained. The U.S. possessed only 4 medical schools, and not a single one was in Baltimore. In response, a small handful of doctors held classes within their homes, but the necessary exercise of performing practice surgeries on corpses was difficult in this setting. Doctors were reluctant to keep cadavers in their homes. One doctor decided to erect an anatomical theater behind his house for students to learn human anatomy and surgery. However, not all of the corpses were donated or gifted unnamed murder victims from the police. While it was legal to use the bodies of executed criminals, there weren't enough to go around. Add to this the fact executions weren't timed for when medical students needed surgical practice, and no one had yet to invent refrigeration to store bodies. The only viable solution was raiding graveyards. Medical students joined petty criminals in stealing freshly buried corpses from the poorest of graveyards. These ones were less likely to have night watchmen, and the poor could only afford flimsy coffins that were easily broken into. However, the poor didn't take this situation lying down. In 1807, an angry mob burned the anatomical theater to the ground. Doctors soon petitioned the state for a more secure training facility. Thus, the University of Maryland School of Medicine was built. If you thought a legitimate school would end the practice of body snatching, you'd be wrong. Maryland, it turns out, had an excellent soil climate for stealing fresh corpses. Combined with Baltimore's high death rate and the railroad that made shipment to other cities easy, body snatching maintained its presence. And this is why Baltimore was nicknamed Resurrection City. And what is a city without a king? William Jansen dressed in rubber boots, gloves, and coat streaked with cemetery clay, so everyone knew his profession. But no one arrested him or issued the city fine against body snatching, or resurrecting, as it was sometimes called. They'd have to catch him for that, and newspaper articles about his exploits didn't count in the courtroom. During one interview, he boldly announced his plans to steal a corpse on Christmas Eve and leave it on the chief of police's doorstep. He was a braggart, but he also proved an unreliable narrator, claiming to have been a medical student in Germany, then Denmark, before immigrating in 1877. Still, the press remained enamored. His methods included observing funerals, leaving them to return that night, digging a hole just large enough to reveal the head of the casket, bashing it in, and fishing the corpse out on a meat hook attached to the jaw, cleaning up everything before he left, and then hauling the corpse away in a sack. But his real distinction came in targeting the cemeteries of the wealthy, instead of the poor in Potter's Fields. And so, one December night, he headed out with a shovel slung over his shoulder. But he wasn't the only one looking for the recently deceased Jane Smith. Come morning, both Jane Smith's and her mother's bodies had been carted off to the medical school, where Jane was dissected, and her 2 decayed mother was stripped of her flesh to become an educational skeleton. Rumors swirled about 4 people being involved in the theft, including a Professor Jensen, who was said to have sold cadavers to several schools in other states. While Jensen and Jansen were one and the same person, he was not a professor. Records list him as a medical student. Brazenly, he didn't skip town, and the police arrested him. Usually, the punishment for body snatching is a mere fine, but that's only if you stole from the poor and not one of Baltimore's most prominent families. He and the other 3 men were charged by a grand jury, but the medical school stood by them and hired the best attorney for their defense. Soon, the judge declared them all innocent, dismissing the charges as based on a mere guess and not hard facts. In response, William Jansen left Baltimore, but he quickly returned. In 1883, he was arrested for stealing the body of Charles Shaw, a young man hanged for the murder of his own sister. The dirt was barely on the coffin and the sun was still shining when Jansen stole the corpse in his usual method. It seemed rather than dampen his taste for the work, the previous trial and his lucky escape only fueled his brazenness, as the papers reported. The body sold for only $18, which was $528 in today's currency. Jansen was not pleased at such a low amount. After spending hours drinking, he would return to the medical school to demand his fair share as he saw it. He was then arrested for profanity by a passing policeman. While sobering up in a jail cell, he got an idea: steal the body back and sell it to a more appreciative school. Once released, he didn't go to the school, but to a local paper where he promised to show where Shaw's body was. 2 reporters eagerly followed him to a dissection room. They didn't stay long. Perhaps they realized it was not the best idea to stand in a dark room with a notorious body snatcher. Perhaps something else spooked them. Either way, the 2 men went running. Now alone, Jansen stole the body for a second time and left for Freedman Hospital after hailing a carriage to carry himself and his cargo. The sun was just rising when he arrived, and left the carriage while he tried to find someone to buy the corpse. The driver, now developed cold feet, abandoned Jansen and headed for the nearest police station. While taking the corpse of an executed criminal was legal, there was a law against transporting a corpse without a permit. Jansen was arrested again, but he wasn't charged with illegally transporting a corpse. Instead, he was charged with malicious trespassing in an operation room. As a result, he went to prison for a little less than a year. This second arrest had a larger impact. By the mid-1880s, he transitioned to comedy and then became an attendant at an asylum. He died broke in November 1887, and in a fitting end, he was probably buried in a potter's field, where it is quite possible his own cadaver was snatched. Thank you for watching. Leave a like, a comment, subscribe, or check out the tip jar. There's always more history.